Hey everybody, so in this video what we're going to do is we're going to take a project which uses a bridge transition to get you from section 1 to section 2 and implement that into a Wwise project. So what we'll do first is open up Wwise and create a new project. Create a new project. I'm going to put it on my desktop. I'm going to call it Wwise Bridge Transitions. I don't need any of these extra plugins, so I'm going to select none and hit OK. I don't need a license for this because it's just for educational purposes, so I'll close that. Whenever I go into Wwise, the first thing I like to do is go to the Layouts tab and choose Interactive Music, since these are all interactive music structures that we're dealing with. I'm going to go over to the Finder, and I have some raw materials here in this folder. So I have a section 1, a section 2, and then 2 transitions to kind of get me back and forth. So what I'm going to do is go over to Wwise, and I'm going to drag each one of those into the default work unit. It's going to create a new music segment for me. And so that was section 1. This is section 2. And then you can see these right there. These are segments that it's creating. I'm going to rename them in a minute and call them segments. And then 2 more, which are the transition segments to get you from section 1 to section 2. Okay. Now, just so that we're not confused, I'm going to call these segments because that's what they are. We basically are taking those WAV files and we're dragging them in. It's creating a new segment. It's actually creating tracks too. I'm not going to rename the tracks for right now because we don't really deal with them so much. So there is both segments. Then I'll go ahead and just name these segments as well. Just to kind of review the overall hierarchy of what's going on, we drag WAV files on the tracks. Tracks goes into segments, which is what we're dealing with now. These segments then go into playlists that we can put in a switch container. That's what we're going to do now, is we're going to make those playlists. So section 1 here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new parent, which is the playlist. And I'm going to call this section 1 playlist container. And then I'm going to go ahead and create the same thing for section 2, a new parent, which is the playlist. Now when I create these playlists, one thing that you may notice is that it's actually a 2-step process, and I've only done the first part of that process, which is to create the playlist. But within the playlist itself, you can see that there's nothing in it yet. So we got to make sure to drag in our segments and set them up to loop infinitely for this project at least. So I'll go back to section 1, 2, the playlist. There's nothing in it yet. Got to make sure to drag that segment into the actual playlist container, make it loop infinitely. Now is a good time to save, so hit Control S. All right. So next, what we need to do is we need to put these 2 sections in a switch so we can kind of switch between them. So I can select both of them like this using the Shift key, then right-click, New Parent, into a switch container. Okay. And then I get an error. I'm not sure what that error is. Hopefully it's not anything bad. Okay. Then we have a switch. We have playlist 1 and 2. I'm just going to check playlist 1 and make sure it's playing okay. Down here you can see that this button is on, this little red button. That's the pin button, which means that the transport won't switch between the different elements that I have selected. So I'm going to unpin that, go up to my playlist 1 here, and you can see now it switches to the correct thing that I want to play. And when I hit play, you can see that it starts playing segment 1, and it will loop infinitely if I let it go all the way to the end. All right. In order for a switch to work, switches need to be connected to the game. The game needs to basically say to Wwise, hey, can you switch music cues? In order to do that, we need to set up a game sync. Game syncs are in one of these tabs up here. We'll hit Game Syncs tab. I'm going to use states for this, but you could use switches or triggers too. In here, let's create a state and let's call it, we're going to create a new state group. which is called player state. And within player state, we got to create some states. And so one of those states could be exploration, and the other one can be combat. So now I have two states within here. Now they're not doing anything yet until I actually connect them up to some interactive audio objects, but I'm going to need them for the game to play out. By the way, just a couple of little things here. This little asterisk means that I haven't saved these yet. If I hit Control S, the asterisk goes away. That's an easy way for you to tell whether your objects have been saved or not. I'm going to go back to the Audio tab. I'm going to select my switch. Sometimes I have to click off of it onto something else to get it to reload. Now I need to have that game sync control my switch. And in order to do that, I have to click on these two greater than symbols, select my state group, player state. And that brings up combat exploration and adds a new one called none. Once I have those three in there, I can start correlating my playlists with these different states. So what I'm going to do is section 1 is the exploration state. I'll just drag it over. And you can see, if I move these windows up a little bit, that my exploration state has been correlated with my section 1 playlist container, which is actually where my exploration music is. Similarly, section 2 is the combat state. And so what I'll do is drag that into combat. So now you can see combat plays the section 2 playlist container. One more thing that I'm going to do before I actually play this, which is to examine how things transition. So I'll go over to the Transitions tab once I'm in my switch. It looks like I am in my switches, which is good. Always pay attention to what's in the menu, inside the window bars up here. So I'm looking at my new music switch container, and I'm looking at Transition tab. Right now there's a default transition going between any source piece of music to any destination, and that is set up to exit the source music, which is the music that's currently playing, wait till the end, the exit cue. I'm going to have that change immediately so we don't have to wait all the way to the end. So let's go ahead and check that out. I'm playing my new music switch container. I'm starting exploration. And when I go into combat, I hear the combat immediately switch over, which is great. I want to customize when I go from section 1 to section 2 using the transition 1. And vice versa, when I'm going from 2 to 1, I'll use the second transition segment. So over in the Transitions tab, under the switch container, I'll add in a transition, and I'm going to select a very specific one. When I'm going from section 1 to section 2, I want to customize this. I'm going to, for this depends a little bit on your music, but I know I want it to happen immediately. I want the first piece of music, the exploration music, to fade out. And I want it to fade out after the destination starts. So go ahead and, let's say it's 3 seconds. And right now, it would, looking at this, it fades out the source before the destination starts playing. I actually want the destination to start right away, so I'll change the offset to 3, which means that my fade doesn't begin until my destination starts playing. I can change the curve if I want to, but I don't need to for this. I'm just going to leave it as a linear curve. Next, I need it to play a transition. So it goes from the source to a transition segment, so I have to select that. Then I want to make sure to select the correct transition segment. And then lastly, I don't need these to fade in and fade out. And then I go to I can select where I want the destination to begin. Remember, I'm going from Explore to Combat. So what I want to do is, I do want to start at the very beginning of the piece. So I'm going to leave it on Entry Cue, which is the very beginning of the piece. And I'm going to fade it in. Okay. The destination, this is what we're talking about now. We are going from Explore to the destination, which is Combat. I don't want it to, so I want my destination to fade up. So what I'll do is change my fade time to 3 seconds, And I actually want to play, I don't want it to fade in under the pre-entry because I don't have a pre-entry for this piece of music. This again depends a little bit on your music. We're going to get into pre-entry and post-exit in a second. So let's listen to this right now. When I'm in Explore and I press play, it starts playing. Then when I go into combat, it's going to start playing the transition cue. And this is the transition cue here. And it played all the way through the transition cue and then started up the destination. Now, that's not quite what I wanted. I wanted the destination to start while the transition was playing. And how do I get it to do that? That has to do with the post-exit region that's in the segment. So if we go to the transition segment, I can see that right now the exit cue or the post-exit region is set up so that it goes all the way to the end. Instead, what I'll do is set it up so that my next cue, meaning my destination cue, is going to begin right here. So I have all this extra time. You probably don't need this time. This transition was written in such a way that they really overlap by a couple seconds. So that's where I'm going to put mine for now. Now when we listen to it, and we play our switch container, and I go from exploration to combat, it immediately starts playing the transition. The next piece of music, destination, is fading in up underneath, and they both kind of land. Now we're in just the combat sequence. All right, so that's pretty good. And now I need one more thing, which is I go back to my switch container, I go to my transition, and I need to make the other transition going from 2 to 1. So add a transition, I customize it so that I'm going from section 2, sorry, that's the combat music, to section 1, that's the explore music. What do I want to happen? First of all, when I make that request, I want to make sure to fade my current music, which is the combat music. And I want to make sure that we fade it after the destination starts. If I have it fade out before, what will happen is it will go to silence and then play my next, but I want them to overlap on top of one another, so I do that. I want to play a transition segment, so I'm going to pick transition 2. There's no fade in and fade out for those, so I'm all set with that. And now I can move on to the destination, which is back to explore. So I'll go ahead here. I want to start at the beginning of the cue. That's fine with me. But I need to fade in underneath the transition segment. So I'll press fade in, edit, and I'll again choose 3 seconds. And this one, so the source in this case is actually going to be my transition segment, and I want my destination to fade up underneath my source. So this is the post-exit, so I have to adjust the post-exit for this transition 2. So I'll go over here, go to my transition 2 segment, and I want to make sure that the new piece of music starts before the end of this piece. So what I'll do is do something like this, and then gradually the new piece of music is going to fade up right there. I held the control key to kind of move the post-exit around. So now when I play this and I start with combat, so this is actually built into the combat, that little run up to this. We're still in combat here. When I go to exploration, we're going to hear the transition, or not. Not because I made a mistake. So let's see what that mistake was. I go to my switch container, I go to transitions. This is what I want here. It waits to the exit cue of that piece, which means it's going to wait all the way to the end of the piece. I want it to happen immediately. Maybe you guys picked up on that when I was building it. So anyways, let's check it out again. So I'm in combat, I start playing it. Again, this run is part of the combat music itself. When I go ahead and switch to the exploration, new transition comes in, and we hear the explore music come back in. All right, let's keep going and go right into combat. We're gonna hear the transition, which starts with that big drum hit, which is cool. The other music comes in underneath. Now we're in combat. Great. Let's go back. We're gonna hear a cymbal swell over the transition. and my next piece of music's gonna fade in, and I can go back and forth. And that's how you do a transition, a bridge transition within Wise. Have fun.